My name is Ernest. I'm a certified facilitator for the work of Byron Katie, and I've put together this presentation to support this series of podcasts I'm doing on the work. If you don't know them, you can find them here on my website, theartofbeinghuman.com/thework. This is the second of two video presentations I'm doing. The first one is, unsurprisingly, titled How to Do the Work Part 1, and the purpose of the presentations is to provide an overview of the mechanics of the work. So I'm not focusing on technique here or on understanding what the work is. You can find all of that in the podcasts. I'm focusing on the basic structure of the process and the elements that go into it. And this means that I'm going through things in a very formal and very structured way. But please don't take that to mean that the work is a set of rules. It isn't, so please don't try to do it right. The work is not about right and wrong. The work is a meditation. The structure is not the main thing. It's helpful to know and to understand the structure, but what makes the work work is your willingness to get silent and inquire deeply and honestly as far into the depths of your mind as you can go. Again, you can find much more information about that in the podcasts. Here, we are going through the bare-bone mechanics, but do not let that fool you into thinking that the mechanics are what it's all about. Okay, so let's get started. Now, the work consists of three parts. First, you identify your thoughts. Then you investigate those thoughts using the 4 questions, and then you turn the thoughts around and find examples of each turnaround. I've already covered part 1 in the first video, and if you haven't seen that, I suggest you do that first. In this video, we will focus on part 2, how to use the 4 questions, and on part 3, how to turn thoughts around and find examples. So the topics we'll cover in this video are the 4 questions, the turnarounds, how to find examples. I'll talk about some different types of facilitations. We'll go through the process as a whole, and then I'll provide links to some further resources. Okay, so let's get started. The simplest version of the work is the so-called yellow card, which you've probably seen if you've ever been at an event about the work or experienced some kind of introduction to it. On the yellow card, you can find the 4 basic questions of the work. Is it true? Can you absolutely know that it's true? How do you react? What happens when you believe that thought? Who would you be without that thought? The first 2 questions are pretty straightforward. The main thing to remember here is that the answer can only be either yes or no. Not yes but or no because. Simply allow yes or no to be enough and take the time to sink into your answer. Question 3 can be a little more tricky. How we react and what happens in a specific situation is a big question with a lot to explore. Most people tend to focus on their emotions and their physical reactions, but there is a lot more you can look at. Whose business are you in when you believe this thought? What do you think you gain by believing it? How do you treat other people when you believe this thought? What images come from the past? What dependencies occur? How do you treat the other person? What can't you do in the situation? What images of the future come up? How do you treat yourself? And so on and so forth. To me, question 3 is like going into a house with a lot of different rooms, and I want to make sure I check out all the rooms on my way through. So to support you in your exploration of question 3, there exists a series of sub-questions you can ask yourself or your client as you journey through the process. These questions are collected on the Facilitation Guide, which you can download from thework.com, or you can find my variation on theartofbeinghuman.com/thework. Now, question 4, who would you be without that thought, does not have any official sub-questions, but in my experience, what can support you in getting into the experience of who you would be is to remember that you're not being asked to let go of the thought, only to do a little experiment. Just for a few moments to experience who would you be without the thought. You don't have to worry, you'll get the thought back in a minute. Stepping into question 4, especially when you've gone deep in question 3, can be quite a journey. So to me, question 4 is very much about being gentle with yourself and having patience as you gradually experience the same moment without the thought. And then I think it's also worth noting that for many years, the way Byron Katie phrased this question was, who or what would you be without that thought? Now, after having identified your thoughts and questioned them with the 4 questions, it's time for the turnarounds. And this is where people often overcomplicate things, and I want to re-emphasize that for simplicity, I'm presenting this as a set of rules, but again, please don't do it right. On the one hand, sticking to the structure may support you in noticing valuable turnarounds even when they seem odd at first. On the other hand, don't get so caught up in the mathematics of it that you lose touch with your depth and silence. Don't forget, this is a meditation, not a crossword puzzle. And with that word of caution, let's dive in. There are 3 basic types of turnarounds: the turnaround to the opposite, the turnaround to the self, and the turnaround to the other. And I present them in this order only because that allows for a simple build-up of my explanations. There is no particular order in which you're supposed to do them, and sometimes, if for instance you find one of them to be particularly challenging, it can be helpful to do the others first and then return to it afterwards and see if it's become easier. But let's look at them one at a time. The turnaround to the opposite can be found in 2 ways. Either add or remove the word not, or insert the opposite word. For example, he is sad can be turned around to the opposite in 2 ways. He is not sad, adding the word not, and he is happy, inserting a word that is the opposite of sad. Similarly, he should think it through can be turned around to he should not think it through, adding the word not, or he should be rash, inserting the opposite word. And notice, to me, in this case, the opposite to thinking it through is to be rash. Others might find other words to be an opposite to them, and then, of course, those are the ones they should use. At other times, there are no opposite words. I want him to read the book can be turned around to I do not want him to read the book, but I want him to unread the book doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. And sometimes it does. If it opens something up for you, go for it. And if not, simply move on to the next variation. And notice that a single turnaround can have several variations. Sometimes not can be inserted in more than one place, for example. I want him to apologize can become I do not want him to apologize, but it can also become I want him to not apologize, which may very well open an entirely new perspective. Next, let's look at the turnaround to the self. There is only one form of this turnaround. Simply insert yourself in place of everyone else in the one-liner. He's annoyed becomes I am annoyed. He doesn't respect me becomes I don't respect myself. I want him to apologize to Mary becomes I want me to apologize to myself. He should behave properly towards Peter becomes I should behave properly towards myself. The last of the basic turnarounds is the turnaround to the other. The point here is to notice that you are doing to others exactly what you think they're doing to you. With this turnaround, he disrespects me becomes I disrespect him. He's annoyed with me becomes I am annoyed with him. What you do here is simply that you swap the pronouns. he is hurting me becomes I am hurting him. He shouldn't treat me that way becomes I shouldn't treat him that way. I want him to see me clearly becomes I want me to see him clearly. This turnaround isn't always a possibility, because it requires for two people to be mentioned in the one-liner. He's a fool, for example, can't be turned around to the other because there is no other to turn it around to. You can do I am a fool, but that's not a turnaround to the other because there is no swapping of anyone. That is the turnaround to the self. At other times, however, this turnaround comes with several variations. Take the one-liner, I want Peter to apologize to Anne, which can be turned around to I want me to apologize to Anne, and also I want me to apologize to Peter. In theory, you can also do I want Anne to apologize to Peter, or I want Peter to apologize to me, but both of these examples are in other people's business. They are new things you want other people to do. And so, in most cases, they will lead away from yourself and into new stories. And sometimes there may be value in that. So, no fixed rules. Okay, summing up. There are three basic types of turnarounds. The turnaround to the opposite, where you insert or remove the word not, or insert the opposite word. The turnaround to the self, where you insert yourself in place of everyone else in the one-liner. And the turnaround to the other, where you swap the pronouns to get back into your own business. You can find these turnarounds listed at the bottom of the Judge Your Neighbor worksheet, where you can find the 4 questions as well. And here, you can also find one extra detail regarding the turnaround for Statement 6 on the worksheet. We turn around Statement 6 in a slightly different way than the others. Statement 6 is the one that begins with, I don't ever want. Examples could be, I don't ever want to be treated so disrespectfully again, or I don't ever want to be let down by my mother again. The turnarounds for Statement 6 are, I am willing to, and I look forward to. So the one-liner, I don't ever want to be treated so disrespectfully again, becomes, I am willing to being treated so disrespectfully again, and I look forward to being treated so disrespectfully again. Similarly, I don't ever want to be let down by my mother again becomes, I am willing to being let down by my mother again, and I look forward to being let down by my mother again. Other than this little difference, we deal with the one-liners in Statement 6 in exactly the same way we do with every other one-liner on the worksheet, finding 3 examples for each turnaround. So far, I've been going through the turnarounds as if they are mainly a semantic exercise. But they are not, of course. The semantics are the smallest part of working with the turnarounds. The main part is finding the examples. When we've taken a one-liner through the 4 questions and identified one of its turnarounds, our task is to find examples of how the turnaround is as true or truer as the original statement. This is where our minds really get to open up, and in order for that to happen, there are a few things worth remembering. We want the examples to be specific and genuine, and we want to find the examples in the same moment that we have written our worksheet from. For example, he does not respect me can be turned around to I do not respect him. And now our task is to find 3 examples of how this turned around statement is true in that moment. In my case, some of the things I may notice as I revisit the situation in my mind is that I speak to him sharply and in a not very respectful tone. I sigh when he speaks, which isn't very respectful. And I interrupt him, which is not very respectful either. We try to find at least 3 examples of each turnaround. Sometimes we have to wait a bit before the examples start showing up, and sometimes we are immediately overwhelmed with examples. But when we have at least 3, we are ready to continue to the next turnaround. In this case, Another way to turn the statement around is, I do not respect myself. And so again, we open our minds to allow examples of how this turnaround is true in the situation to show up. In my case, they could be, I expect myself to know what to do, which isn't very respectful. I tell myself that his actions are my fault, and as such disrespecting myself, and I do not express how I feel, which is also not being very respectful around myself. And once we've found at least 3 examples, we move on to the next turnaround and look for 3 more. Here, that could be the turnaround, he does respect me, and some examples could be, he doesn't leave the situation, he gets upset, which means he actually cares what I think, and for him, it's really not about respect, it's about what's fair, and he simply sees this in a different way than I do. He does respect me, that's not what it's about at all. As I said, for the turnarounds to have effect in our nervous system, what we want from our examples are for them to be specific and genuine. We make our examples specific by making sure they are anchored in the concrete moment. As an example, we might say, for instance, I treat him badly. Now, this is a very general and abstract observation, which says nothing about how specifically I treat him badly, and as such, does not activate our nervous system to create the felt perception we're looking for. So we can move a little closer by specifying that I ignore him. But to really get in touch with how we're treating him in that moment, we can go all the way to I pretend not to hear it when he asks for the butter. This is being specific. Similarly, I don't think he has anything of value to offer is a very general observation. I reject his input is better, but I say no to his suggestion about having the meeting on Friday instead, gets us really close to our own behavior and puts us in touch with the example as a specific experience anchored in the concrete. We also want our examples to be genuine. And by this I mean that the examples should be true for you as the client. It doesn't matter what everybody else thinks. It's your nervous system we're working with, and you cannot cheat yourself. All of this, of course, can be a lot to remember, especially when you're just starting out. Luckily, there are a number of different ways you can support yourself. First of all, you can get someone else to facilitate you and help you stay on track as you go through the process. Maybe you know someone who's also interested in the work, and you can swap facilitations, or you can book a session with a certified facilitator. One option is to simply meet via Skype or Zoom or similar video conferencing platforms. This is a very used, very convenient, and very effective way to do the work with others without having to deal with all the practicalities of getting together physically. I'll explain where to find a list of certified facilitators you can contact when I go through the resources later on. If for some reason you don't want to work with a facilitator, you can facilitate yourself. This is one of the many positive aspects of the work, and it means that no matter what the circumstances, the work is always available to you. I will say, though, that I strongly recommend booking a few sessions with a facilitator now and then. Especially when you're just starting out, you can save yourself from getting stuck in quite a few blind alleys by getting the direct support from someone who has experience and who can demonstrate some of the subtleties that are easy to miss if you're only working on your own. When you self-facilitate, there are basically 2 ways to do it. One is to hold the process in your head and go through the questions and answers only in your mind. This can be somewhat taxing, especially in the beginning when the structure and nuances aren't entirely clear to you. And so the other is to go through the process as a written meditation. To support you in this, you can use the One Belief at a Time worksheet. This worksheet holds all the questions for you and allows you to focus on going inside and finding the answers without having to simultaneously juggle the structure and the order of the questions and the correct phrasing and so on. You can download and print out the One Belief at a Time worksheet and fill it in by hand, but it also comes as an app for your phone or iPad if you're comfortable working with those. Again, I'll explain where to find these resources in a moment. Okay, We've covered a lot of ground in this video as well as the first one, so let me finish by offering an overview of the entire process of doing the work as a whole. The first thing we do is fill in a Judge Your Neighbor worksheet. As I said in the first video, there are other ways of collecting beliefs to work with, but the Judge Your Neighbor worksheet, or JYN as it's affectionately referred to, is one of the most straightforward and comprehensive methods of collecting all your beliefs in a specific moment. The JYN gives you a number of individual one-liners to work with, and you can either take them through the process using simply the yellow card, using the expanded version with the sub-questions. You can get out a bunch of one belief at a time worksheets, or you can work them using the app on your phone or iPad. Whatever form you prefer, you start at the top of the JYN, picking the first one-liner and taking it through all the 4 questions and the turnarounds, finding examples for each turnaround. Then, once you're done, you pick the next one-liner and take that one through all the 4 questions, turnarounds, and examples, and so on. So please notice that every one-liner goes through the entire process of answering the 4 questions, finding a turnaround, giving examples, finding the next turnaround, giving examples of that one, and so on until there are no more turnarounds with that one-liner, and then you move on to the next one-liner. Now, in terms of time frame for this, personally, I can easily spend 45 minutes on a single one-liner. And I've experienced that when people hear this and realize that you're supposed to go through every single one of them, obviously if you multiply 45 minutes with, say, 18 one-liners in a worksheet, you will end up with a very long time. However, what happens for me when I spend that long on the first one-liner is that I get so deep that very often I have to spend far less time on the following ones. I can just breeze through them, and when I get halfway through the worksheet, the whole thing is often more or less resolved. Sometimes I can't even understand how I could write these things. And then, as I just breeze through them, maybe 1 or 2 pop out and still hold some elements I haven't seen, so I go a little deeper with them. And I know there are others who have a different approach. They spend less time on the first ones, but keep that pace all the way through. The end result is more or less the same, though. In my experience, it takes most people around an hour and a half or up to 2 hours to go through an entire worksheet. And of course there are variations. I know some people who can get all the way through in just an hour, and others who prefer to spend several days on it. In whatever form we do it, though, I agree very much with what Katie says. The only thing that takes more time than doing the work is not doing the work. This is my definite experience as well, both in terms of time, agony, and energy. And that's it. That is the work in its entirety, from a purely mechanical point of view. Actually, doing the work and traveling through these mechanics in reality is a meditation that never stops deepening. And although this is basically what I've been doing from the very beginning, my work today and what I find in my meditation is very different from how it was when I started out. Which is another thing I deeply appreciate about this process. Okay, so let me share some resources. First of all, there is Byron Katie's website at thework.com and her books. Katie discovered and pioneered the work. She holds all the copyrights and she makes sure that the work is freely available to everyone. If you go to her site, you don't have to sign up for anything. You can get direct access to all the tools you need to do the work in many different languages, including links to the app I spoke about earlier. This is also where you can sign up for her events, and this is where you can find a certified facilitator to work with in many different languages. Another good resource is the Institute for the Work of Byron Katie, and you find that at instituteforthework.com. This is the International Association for the Work. It's a member-run organization which offers online training courses in the work. There's a free helpline you can call and do the work anonymously 24/7. And this is also the organization in charge of the Certified Facilitator Program for the work. And finally, of course, there is my website. This is where you can find these video presentations, also all the tools I use, There are articles there and case studies, and this is also where you can find those podcasts on the work which I mentioned earlier. And everything here is also for free. So that's it. Here's my email address. You're more than welcome to send me an email if you have any questions or comments. I'm very happy to answer. The work of Byron Katie, the Judge Your Neighbor worksheet, the One Believe at a Time worksheet, Katie's Facilitator Guide, Loving What Is, I Need Your Love, Is It True, the Certified Facilitator logo, and the Heart logo are all copyrights of Byron Katie International. And you can find me at theartofbeinghuman.com, so feel free to stop by. Thank you for watching this presentation. I hope it serves you.